Welcome to another podcast of the Riffle series. The Riffle, a podcast series brought to you by 10 Leaves. Welcome to today's deep dive. Imagine a cartel trying to move $10 million across the globe.
Right. They definitely aren't using like duffel bags stuffed with cash anymore.
Exactly. They use a smartphone app, maybe a shell company, and, a digitally generated fake ID.
Yeah, the days of Miami Vice are long gone.
Very long gone. And the only thing standing between them and the global banking system is a single, heavily regulated risk assessment.
Which is actually kind of wild to think about when you consider the stakes.
Really is. So today, we are looking at the architectural blueprint of that exact front line. It's Notice No, FSRA FCCP 62-2026.
Quite a mouthful.
Yeah, well, it was issued on April 10th, 2026 by the Abu Dhabi Global Market, or the ADGM, specifically their Financial and Cybercrime Prevention Unit.
And for you listening, whether you work in corporate compliance or you're just, fascinated by the hidden machinery of global finance, you really have to understand that this notice isn't just bureaucratic paperwork.
Right, it's not a checkbox.
Exactly. It dictates where a massive financial firm looks, what it looks for, and how it deploys its resources to actually find threats. It's the absolute front line of defense in global finance.
So our mission today is to decode this guidance on conducting what the ADGM calls a business risk assessment, or a BRA.
Right, the BRA.
We're going to explore how this single document forms the legal foundation to fight an entire ecosystem of crime. And I should mention the document throws around a few acronyms we need to establish right away.
Yeah, the finance sector loves its acronyms.
They really do. So AML is anti-money laundering. TFS stands for targeted financial sanctions.
And then there's PF, which is proliferation financing.
Right, the financing of weapons of mass destruction, so pretty heavy stuff.
Extremely heavy. The stakes here are as high as they get. A firm cannot simply guess at its vulnerabilities to money laundering or terrorist financing.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of how a bank actually stops financial crime, we need to understand who is required to look for it.
Right, the legal muscle forcing them to do so.
Exactly. Reading through this notice, it's clear the ADGM isn't just making a polite suggestion here. They cite some serious legislative weight.
The legal foundation is entirely uncompromising. I mean, the mandate for a BRA is embedded directly in Rule 6 of the AML rulebook.
And it goes higher than that, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's backed by Decree Federal Law Number 10 of 2025, alongside multiple UAE cabinet decisions from 2020 and 2025.
So this is federal law being applied at the institutional level.
Yes, and to comply with that federal law, the ADGM requires a very strict governance framework.
Right. The guidance explicitly states that the Money Laundering Reporting Officer, the MLRO, is the person responsible for conducting and maintaining the business risk assessment.
They're the ones on the ground doing the heavy lifting.
But then it mandates that the board of directors or senior management must formally approve it.
Which is a crucial detail.
And doing a BRA, it feels like doing a brutal, unsparing security audit on your own house before you are even allowed to go out and buy the locks.
That's a great analogy.
You're walking around logging every broken window, every loose hinge, every blind spot in the yard.
And finding those vulnerabilities is a highly specialized skill.
Right. But this brings up a pushback I have regarding the governance aspect.
Okay, what is it?
If the MLRO is the security expert, the person actually doing the grueling work of cataloging all those broken windows, why does the board need to formally approve the findings? Doesn't injecting the board of directors into the process just add corporate red tape to something that needs to be fast and agile?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the ADGM requires board approval for a very specific strategic reason. It's about resource allocation and top-down accountability.
Okay, accountability makes sense.
Right, because if the MLRO finds a broken window in, let's say, the firm's digital onboarding process, fixing it costs real money.
Like purchasing new biometric software.
Exactly, or hiring more compliance staff, rolling out firm-wide training. An MLRO can identify the risks, but they do not hold the purse strings.
I see. So the outcomes of the business risk assessment have to be embedded into the firm's entire enterprise risk management framework.
Yes, exactly. Something only the board can mandate the allocation of capital for.
So it prevents the MLRO from being siloed in a basement somewhere?
Precisely. If a massive money laundering scandal happens down the line, the board can't just throw their hands up and claim ignorance.
Because they literally signed their names to the assessment of the risks.
It forces business leaders to legally own their risk appetite.
Wow, okay. So If the board is now personally on the hook for acknowledging these open doors and broken windows, what exactly are the burglars trying to steal right now?
Well, the ADGM calls these raw threats inherent risks.
Inherent risk. So that's the unfiltered threat level.
Exactly. It is the risk present prior to the implementation of any controls whatsoever.
The baseline danger.
Right. It's the danger you face simply by opening your doors for business in the modern financial world.
And the ADGM outlines 5 core categories that firms have to assess here.
Right. Let's run through them.
There's customer risk, geographic risk, product and service risk, delivery channel risk, and transactional risk.
And some of these are fairly intuitive. Geographic risk obviously means looking at where your clients live or operate.
Paying special attention to high-risk jurisdictions flagged by the FATF. Right?
Exactly, the Financial Action Task Force. And then transactional risk is just the volume and complexity of the money moving around.
But here's where it gets really interesting. I'm looking at the customer risk section here, and it explicitly flags something called a VASP.
Ah, yes. VASP.
Now, I know PP means a politically exposed person like a foreign government official who might be susceptible to bribery.
Sure, that's standard.
But what on earth is a VASP, and why are they singled out?
So VASP stands for Virtual Asset Service Provider.
Oh, like a crypto exchange.
Exactly. The most common example would be a cryptocurrency exchange. They are flagged as high inherent risk because virtual assets can be transferred globally in seconds.
And usually with layers of pseudonymity, right? Or even outright anonymity.
Exactly. If your bank is servicing a VASP, your inherent risk of inadvertently facilitating money laundering skyrockets.
Because the underlying assets are literally designed to be difficult to trace.
You got it.
Okay, that makes sense. But the product and service risk category has another specific warning that caught my eye. Dual-use goods.
Yes, that's a really important one.
What are those?
Those are products or technologies that have totally legitimate everyday civilian applications, but can be easily repurposed for military use or the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction.
Like what?
Aviation parts are a classic example, or certain industrial chemicals.
Oh, I see.
Like, financing a cross-border shipment of agricultural fertilizer is a standard low-risk banking service in most contexts, right?
Sure, farmers need fertilizer.
But if that exact same fertilizer is being shipped to a region with active insurgencies, the inherent risk flips entirely.
Because it can be used to manufacture explosives.
Exactly. The firm has to deeply assess the dual-use potential of everything they finance.
Wow. Okay, wait. I want to look at the delivery channel risk category now, because this part of the guidance seems completely counterintuitive to me.
How so?
The ADGM notes that channels involving non-face-to-face onboarding and digital platforms present increased risks. They need to be evaluated as inherently dangerous.
That's correct.
But isn't all modern banking digital and non-face-to-face? I mean, I haven't walked into a physical bank branch in 5 years.
Most people haven't.
Right. So if an app on a smartphone is the absolute global industry standard for banking, how can the ADGM treat it as an anomaly that carries inherently high risk?
What's fascinating here is that we often confuse the word standard with the word safe.
Okay, that's a fair point.
Digital, borderless banking is absolutely the standard, but the very things that make a digital platform phenomenal for you as a consumer.
The speed, the lack of friction, the borderless access.
Exactly. Those are the exact same tools that money launderers weaponize.
Because friction is annoying for a regular customer, but friction is a brick wall for a criminal.
Right. If you can open a checking account in 3 minutes using a scanned ID from 1,000 miles away, so can a front company for an illegal organization.
Right. The app doesn't know who is holding the phone.
Exactly. So the ADGM isn't saying you can't use digital onboarding. They are forcing the firm to acknowledge that the baseline vulnerability of a digital channel is inherently higher than having a human being sit across a desk from a client.
Looking them in the eye and verifying a physical passport.
Yes. You have to design your entire compliance architecture with that raw, inherent danger in mind.
Which brings up a massive operational problem.
Oh, definitely.
If the delivery channels are digital and the threats involve virtual assets, how does a firm actually score these threats mathematically?
It's not easy. The ADGM demands that firms evaluate new developments like artificial intelligence, machine learning, and blockchain technology.
Scoring these risks feels less like checking off a static list and more like, I don't know, playing 3D chess against criminals.
That is a very accurate way to look at it.
If the bad guys are using AI to hide their tracks, The firm's heat map has to account for how easily that AI facilitates illicit activities.
And that's why the ADGM explicitly demands systems to identify emerging risks in a timely manner.
Right, you can't just react to past crimes.
Exactly. The regulatory expectation is that you're anticipating how AI and blockchain will be misused tomorrow.
Okay, so let's talk about the mechanics of assessing that risk. Because they can't just write a memo saying, AI seems risky right now.
No, the guidance requires firms to use structured tools like risk matrices or heat maps.
Okay, how does an MLRO take a sprawling concept like artificial intelligence and turn it into a number on a heat map?
Well, firms have to assess two distinct metrics: the likelihood of the risk occurring and the impact if it does.
Okay, so let's break down exactly how that works in practice.
You build a matrix. Let's use a standard 3x3 grid. The y-axis is likelihood, scored from 1 to 3.
And the x-axis is impact, also scored 1 to 3.
Exactly. Let's say a criminal uses generative AI to create deepfake videos to bypass digital identity verification.
Which is happening more and more.
Right. The MLRO has to score that. They might look at industry data, past audit findings, and suspicious transaction reports, STRs.
Okay.
And they determine that the likelihood of this happening is high. So that's a 3.
And if a criminal successfully bypasses identity verification, the impact is catastrophic because they now have full access to the financial system. So that's also the 3.
Right. And then you multiply the likelihood by the impact. 3 times 3 is 9.
So a score of 9 puts that specific AI threat into the deep red zone of the heat map.
Yes. A 9 means the inherent risk is critical. It triggers an immediate requirement for aggressive countermeasures.
Okay, so we have mathematically mapped the risks. The firm knows its digital onboarding deepfake threat is a level 9.
Right.
How does a business actually neutralize a 9? And more importantly, what happens to the stubborn risks that survive those defenses?
This is the transition from mapping inherent risk to evaluating controls and finally determining residual risk.
Okay, the guidance dictates that a firm's controls must align strictly with the ADGM AML rulebook.
Yes, which means rigorous customer due diligence, or CDD.
And enhanced due diligence, EDD, for high-risk profiles, plus mandatory AML and TFS training for staff at least annually.
Right. So how do those controls interface with the level 9 digital onboarding threat we just mapped?
Right, exactly.
Well, the controls are the actual countermeasures deployed. If the inherent risk of a deepfake identity is a 9, your control cannot just be a basic document scan.
That wouldn't do anything against a deepfake.
Exactly. The firm might implement biometric facial recognition software that requires the user to turn their head in real time.
Like liveness detection algorithms.
Yes. And then, as a secondary control, any flagged application is routed to a highly trained human analyst for manual enhanced due diligence.
So what does this all mean? Let me throw an analogy at you to make sure I'm visualizing the mechanics of this correctly.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let's look at this whole process like a water filter.
Okay.
The inherent risk is the murky tap water coming straight out of the pipe. You know it's full of impurities.
Right.
The controls, the biometric software, the human analysts, the staff training. That's your heavy-duty carbon filter.
Catching all the big stuff.
Exactly. The heavy metals, the obvious shell companies. But no filter in the world catches 100% of everything.
Very true.
So the residual risk is the microscopic particles that are still left in the glass of water you are about to drink.
That is a brilliant way to put it. The ADGM cares obsessively about those microscopic particles.
Because they can still make you sick.
Exactly. They define residual risk as the exact level of risk remaining after all mitigating controls and measures have been applied.
You are acknowledging that the biometric filter is incredibly strong, but it is not flawless.
This raises an important question, though.
Yeah.
How much residual risk is a business legally willing to swallow? Because you don't just accept a high residual risk, shrug your shoulders, and say you tried your best.
Right. You are about to drink the water, fully knowing there's still particles in it.
Exactly. The document dictates that high residual risks require enhanced monitoring, more intensive due diligence, and dramatically increased senior management oversight.
It dictates the firm's entire risk mitigation strategy moving forward.
Yes. If a specific digital product still has a high residual risk for terrorist financing, even after you've applied every biometric control you have,
The board faces a binary choice.
right? Do we siphon massive amounts of capital into constantly monitoring this product, or is this product simply too dangerous to offer to the public?
And this brings us to a crucial point about the life cycle of this whole process. Because those leftover residual risks, those microscopic particles in the water, They mutate.
The global environment constantly changes.
Which means your risk assessment can't just be a static document that gets printed out, bound in a folder, and shoved into a filing cabinet to satisfy an auditor.
The ADGM is unforgiving on this point. The business risk assessment must be a living document.
And the requirements for documentation are heavy.
Extremely heavy. A firm must clearly record its methodology, the risk factors, the rationale for assigning a score of 9 versus a score of 4.
Plus the specific mitigation strategies and a full summary of the residual risks.
Right. And it has to be updated on a regular basis, at least annually.
But the annual update is just the absolute bare minimum, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. The guidance mandates that the BRA must be updated more frequently based on what the ADGM calls trigger events.
And when you look at the list of trigger events, they are everywhere. If the firm launches a new product, that's a trigger.
Or introducing a new piece of technology or a change in business practices.
An update to the UAE National Risk Assessment. All triggers.
Even simply becoming aware that a money laundering or proliferation financing risk has increased globally requires an update.
Any single one of those events means the MLRO has to pull the risk assessment back out.
Recalculate the inherent risks, stress test the controls, and determine the new residual risk all over again.
I want to focus on the operational weight of this for a moment. This must be so demanding for a compliance team.
It's relentless.
Imagine the MLRO's job on a Monday morning following a major trigger event. Let's say over the weekend, a sudden geopolitical conflict erupts halfway across the world.
Upending global supply chains.
Right. New international sanctions are instantly deployed. On Monday morning, the MLRO walks into the office, and the geographic risk of a dozen countries just went from a level 3 to a level 9.
And that MLRO cannot just send an email to the staff telling them to be careful.
Exactly. They have to formally adjust the mathematical heat maps. They have to review every single product line connected to those new high-risk jurisdictions.
And crucially, because of the governance framework we talked about at the very beginning.
The board approval.
Right. The guidance specifically states firms must maintain proper version control and a record of board or senior management approvals.
So the MLRO rewrites the methodology, applies new controls for the sanctions, and then has to take this massive updated document back to the board of directors for a fresh, formal sign-off.
Every single time.
An amount of friction that introduces into a corporation is staggering.
It is, but that operational weight is entirely the point. The financial system relies on that friction to slow down the movement of illicit capital.
Right.
In fact, the ADGM ends this April 2026 notice with a stark reminder. They explicitly remind firms of their obligations to comply with federal legislations, national directives, and the ADGM rulebook.
And the quote is, to avoid any regulatory actions.
Exactly.
Which is a highly sanitized way of saying, keep up with the threat landscape, or we will fine you, sanction you, or revoke your license to operate.
The mandate leaves absolutely no room for interpretation. The tools used by money launderers are constantly evolving. If a financial institution's defenses aren't evolving at the exact same speed,
that institution is a vulnerability to the entire global economy.
Exactly.
Pulling all of this together, it is clear that the ADGM's notice is far more than regulatory red tape.
Oh, absolutely. It is a dynamic architectural blueprint for building a financial fortress in one of the world's major financial hubs.
It requires an institution to possess deep mathematical self-awareness. You have to meticulously quantify your own flaws before you can build effective strengths.
Right.
For you listening, whether you are prepping for a high-stakes compliance meeting, catching up on UAE financial law, or if you are just fascinated by how we manage systemic risk in the modern world, there is a core lesson here that applies almost everywhere.
It's a phenomenal blueprint for structural resilience.
This framework: identify your raw inherent risk, apply your controls, measure your leftover residual risk, and constantly review the environment for trigger events. It's a masterful way to assess almost any complex problem.
You don't ignore the dangers. You quantify them, you filter them, and you keep a very close eye on whatever slips through.
Exactly. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final provocative thought to ponder on your own.
Oh, okay. What is it?
Well, we discussed how the ADGM specifically lists artificial intelligence and machine learning as inherent risks.
Right. New, highly capable technologies that criminals can use to bypass security.
Right, to facilitate financial crime. But consider the staggering complexity of the compliance framework we just broke down.
Key massive.
The constant updating of heat maps, tracking global geopolitical trigger events, monitoring millions of digital transactions for anomalies, and calculating residual risk across a global enterprise in real time.
The sheer volume of data processing required is immense.
Right, so at what point will the operational weight become so heavy that human compliance teams simply cannot keep up?
That's a really good question.
Will businesses eventually have to rely entirely on an AI MLRO just to process the sheer volume of global trigger events?
Oh, wow.
Could the ultimate control measure, the only thing actually capable of doing a business risk assessment at the speed the modern world requires, eventually be the exact same technology that currently poses the biggest inherent risk?
Fighting fire with fire. The tension between AI as a threat and AI as the ultimate defense is a paradox the entire industry is going to have to navigate.
We will certainly be watching how it unfolds. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time as we continue to explore the complex currents of the global financial ecosystem.